Welcome to Red Bay Farms. Out here, we use our golf carts for all kinds of chores. Believe me, they get used from checking fence lines to hauling feed to the animals. On a farm, they save a lot of time in walking. They're a very important piece of equipment in the day-to-day life on the farm. When one breaks down, it is sorely missed. So we try to keep up the maintenance on them just as we would any other piece of farm equipment. Today, we are going to be working on our 2013 Freedom model, TXT, 48-volt, EZGO. Here we have a noise coming from the rear of the cart. It's one of those noises you hear and you know it needs to be repaired before it breaks down completely. Based on past experience, it sounds like the input shaft is worn to a point where it is not as tight on the coupling splines as it should be. Therefore, it generates that noise and it will have to be replaced. The very first thing we want to do is be safe. Safety glasses are a must out here on the farm. Another precaution we take is to jack up the rear of the cart and place it on jack stands. Anytime we disconnect wires on a golf cart, we make sure the ignition is in the off position. And we flip the controller switch from run to tow maintenance. As an extra precaution, we break the circuit of the battery pack by removing a wire somewhere in the circuit. This ensures there is no power going to either the controller or the motor. It's best if you tuck the wire out of the way, so it won't come into contact with a battery post, and causing a short. Now that we have the power disconnected, we can start to remove the wires from the motor. In order to help with the reinstallation of the wires, it's best to make sure they are labeled to the corresponding terminal. To remove the nuts, we will need a 7/16 and a half-inch wrench. Our model is equipped with a speed control sensor, and it will have to be disconnected as well. With all the wires off and the speed sensor disconnected, we are ready to remove the bolts holding the motor in place. There are 3 of them. You will need a 7/16 socket and socket wrench. The electric motors are very heavy. They weigh approximately 50 pounds. I recommend removing the side bolts first, and then remove the top bolt last. As I said earlier, these motors are very heavy and they can be awkward to handle. So, I made a homemade carrying handle in order to help with maneuvering the motor off of the input shaft. It's fairly simple in its design and easy for you to make yourself. I used refurbished tie-down straps and an old shovel handle to make it. So far, it's been a great help in handling these motors. Now that we got the motor off, we can start on pulling the input shaft. The only thing holding the shaft in place is a C-clip. Or, it's sometimes called a snap ring. I recommend having a set of C-clip pliers in order to remove the C-clip, and to reinstall it later. Before we remove the input shaft, let's look at the condition of the splines. As you can see, they are worn. Look at the area indicated by the arrows. You can see how the shoulder of the spline is worn away. This will cause the sound we heard earlier in the video. Now, using a small pair of channel locks, we can remove the input shaft by pulling straight out. There is another set of bearings on the other end of the shaft that sometimes gets hung up. Just work the shaft straight out. Looking at the race, where the old bearing set, we can see it needs to be cleaned up. And there is an O-ring just inside the opening. Check and make sure it's in good condition. Okay, we got the race cleaned up. Let's check and make sure there is no trash or burrs left to interfere with the installation of the new shaft. With everything being done, we are ready to reinstall the shaft. Before installing it, inspect it closely and make sure there is no damage done to the splines or the gears. Insert the shaft into the transaxle, and gently work it in until you feel it slide into place. Using the C-clip pliers, insert the C-clip. Once you have it in, use a flathead screwdriver to push it into place. Before we install the motor, I recommend taking a small amount of all-purpose grease and rub it onto the splines. This helps with sliding the motor back onto the shaft. And be sure to not put too much grease on the shaft. Just a small dab is all you need. If you put too much on there, it could cause a suction between the coupler on the motor and the input shaft. This will make removing the motor much harder if the need to remove it arises in the future. With the aid of our homemade handle, we can guide the motor onto the input shaft and push it towards the transaxle as far as it will go. Now, we can put the bolts back in, going in the direct opposite order that we took them off. Using our socket wrench, snug up the bolts. Once they are snug, go back and tighten them. Be careful to not over-tighten them, as this could cause you to break off the head of the bolt, and result having to drill out the broken bolt. Go ahead and plug up the speed control. Using the same nuts that you took off earlier, place the wires back on the motor, on their proper terminals, and hand tighten them down. Once you got them on, go back and tighten them with the proper wrench. Now it's time to reconnect the batteries. Sometimes, especially if you have a voltage reducer installed, you will see a small spark occur when you place the wire back onto the terminal. This is normal. Once you have the wire on, tighten the nut hand tight and then finish tightening the nut with a wrench. Take the toggle switch and flip it back to run. Wait 30 seconds before turning the key on. This allows the controller time to run its startup sequence. Now that we have waited 30 seconds, turn the key on and place the selector switch into forward. Press on the accelerator just to make sure everything works. Do not run it but just a few seconds in order to avoid damage. Well, it looks like we did a good job. It does sound better. We have a few other projects we want to do to it before we put the body back on. But for now, we are done. If this has helped you, or you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to hit the like button. Also, we'll be adding more golf cart repair videos to our channel. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section below. Thanks, and have a good day.